The weight of guilt. I never thought I'd be the kind of man who would kill his wife. That sounds like the beginning of a cheap paperback thriller, doesn't it? But this isn't fiction. My name is Michael Linden, and 1 week ago, I killed Sarah, my wife of 15 years, the mother of my child. I didn't mean to do it. That's what they all say. But I truly didn't. One moment we were arguing in our kitchen, Sarah threatening to take Jamie away from me, and the next, I can still hear it. The sickening crack of her head against the marble countertop. The sudden, terrible stillness that followed. It wasn't premeditated. It wasn't even intentional. But intention doesn't matter when there's a body cooling on your kitchen floor and your 8-year-old son is sleeping down the hall. Jamie. Everything I've done since that moment has been for Jamie. That's what I tell myself. Anyway, that's how I justify the tar from the garage, the midnight burial in the woods behind our house, the elaborate web of lies I've crafted in the weeks since. Sarah's gone to visit her sister. Sarah needed some time away. Sarah this, Sarah that, always just out of reach, just around the corner, just about to call. But the truth has a weight to it, a physical presence that settles on your shoulders and presses down until you can barely stand upright. And over the past week, that weight has become increasingly literal. It started as a sensation between my shoulder blades, a pressure point, nothing more. I blamed it on stress, on the physical strain of carrying Sarah's body that night. But it grew heavier each day until I found myself stooping under an invisible burden that no one else could see. No one except Jamie. Daddy, why are you carrying Mommy on your back every day? Those words, spoken so innocently over dinner tonight, turned my blood to ice. Because I knew, God help me, I knew that Sarah was there. Not metaphorically, not as some manifestation of my guilt. She was there, clinging to my back, her dead weight a constant reminder of what I'd done. And Jamie could see her. Now I sit at my desk, writing this account by the dim light of my laptop. It's 1 a.m., and the house is quiet except for the occasional creak of settling wood. Or footsteps. Sometimes I think I hear footsteps in the hallway, soft and measured, like Sarah's used to be. The weight on my back has become so heavy that I can barely sit upright. It shifts occasionally, adjusting itself, as if making itself comfortable for a long journey. Sarah's journey. My journey. Our penance. Jamie told me she wants me to confess, to face what I've done. He says she'll only get heavier until I do. Tomorrow, I'll drive to the police station. I'll tell them everything. But first, I need to write it all down. Every detail, every moment, every terrible decision that led me here. Perhaps in the telling, I'll understand it myself. Perhaps in the confession, I'll find some small measure of peace. Though I suspect the weight on my back will never truly leave me. Sarah and I met in college. She was studying English literature. I was fumbling my way through a business degree. We were opposites in many ways. She was passionate and creative. I was practical and reserved. But something clicked between us. By graduation, we were engaged. By 25, we were married. By 27, Jamie arrived, squalling and perfect. For years, things were good. Not perfect. No marriages, but good. We bought a house in the suburbs, a 2-story colonial with a big backyard that backed up to a protected forest. Sarah started teaching at the local high school. I climbed the corporate ladder at a marketing firm downtown. We took vacations to the beach in summer. We hosted Christmas dinner every other year. We were normal, painfully, beautifully normal. The trouble started about 3 years ago. Small things at first, bickering over bills, disagreements about Jamie's education, the usual marital friction. But the arguments grew more frequent, more heated. Sarah accused me of being emotionally distant. I accused her of being financially irresponsible. We both retreated into our separate corners, nursing our wounds and gathering ammunition for the next round. Last year, I discovered she'd been having an affair with a colleague at her school, a younger man. One of those energetic English teachers who quotes poetry and wears elbow patches on his blazers. When confronted, Sarah didn't deny it. She just looked at me with tired eyes and said, "At least he sees me." We should have ended it then. Filed for divorce. Divided our assets. Worked out a custody arrangement for Jamie. That's what reasonable people do. But we weren't being reasonable. Sarah refused to move out of the house her parents had helped us buy. I refused to give up daily access to my son. So we continued living together, sleeping in separate bedrooms, conducting our marriage like a Cold War, with Jamie caught in the demilitarized zone between us. The night it happened, a week ago now, Sarah came home late. I was in the kitchen, pouring myself a glass of red wine. It was a cheap Cabernet, nothing special. But I remember the label distinctly. A black crow perched on a fence post. Strange, the details that stick with you. She'd been drinking, not heavily, but enough that her words had that loose quality they got when she was buzzed. She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching me with narrowed eyes. "We need to talk about Jamie," she said. I took a sip of wine. "What about him?" "I've been offered a teaching position at a private school in Colorado. The pay is better, the curriculum is stronger, and they have an opening for Jamie in their 3rd grade class." The wine turned acid in my stomach. "Colorado? You're not taking my son to Colorado. My sister lives there. She can help with childcare." "You're not taking him, Sarah." Her lips twisted into a bitter smile. "I've already spoken to my lawyer. Given your work schedule and my role as primary caregiver, I have a strong case for primary custody. You can visit during holidays." "Visit?" The word felt like ash in my mouth. "You're talking about my son." "Our son," she corrected. "Who deserves better than growing up in a house filled with tension and resentment?" "So your solution is to rip him away from his father? To move him across the country?" "My solution is to give him a fresh start. Away from this." She gestured vaguely between us. I slammed my wine glass down on the counter, harder than I intended. Red liquid sloshed over the rim, staining the white marble. "You're not taking him, Sarah. I'll fight you every step of the way." She pushed away from the doorframe, stepping closer. "With what money? You think your salary can match what my parents will contribute to my legal fees? Face it, Michael, you've already lost." "Is this about Jamie?" I demanded. "Or is this about your boyfriend? Is he moving Colorado too?" A flush crept up her neck. "Don't make this ugly. You're never going to see him again," she continued, her voice rising. "I've already spoken to my lawyer." Something inside me snapped at those words. I don't remember stepping forward. I don't remember reaching out. But I remember the look of surprise on her face as she stumbled backward. I remember the way her arms pinwheeled, trying to catch her balance. I remember the sickening crack as her head connected with the corner of the marble countertop. And then stillness. Sarah sprawled on the kitchen floor, a thin stream of blood pooling beneath her head. My wine glass shattered beside her, the red liquid indistinguishable from her blood. I stood frozen, unable to process what had just happened. This couldn't be real. This was a nightmare, a terrible dream from which I would soon wake. But the seconds ticked by, and Sarah didn't move, and the pool of blood grew larger. From down the hall came the soft, rhythmic breathing that told me Jamie was still asleep in his room, unaware that his world had just imploded. I knelt beside Sarah, my hands hovering uselessly over her body. I pressed my fingers to her neck, searching for a pulse I already knew wouldn't be there. Her skin was still warm, but there was no movement beneath it, no life. I had killed my wife. The next few hours passed in a blur of panic and cold calculation. I checked on Jamie first, making sure he was still asleep. He was curled on his side, one arm wrapped around the stuffed bear Sarah had given him for his 5th birthday. His face was peaceful, innocent. I closed his door softly and returned to the kitchen. I couldn't call an ambulance. I couldn't report what had happened. They would take me away, and what would happen to Jamie then? Sarah's parents had never approved of me. They'd make sure I never saw him again. The foster care system? Distant relatives who had never shown any interest in him? The thought was unbearable. So I made a decision, a terrible decision that would haunt me for the rest of my life. However long that might be, I went to the garage and retrieved the large tarp we kept for yard work. Back in the kitchen, I wrapped Sarah's body carefully, trying not to look at her face, trying not to think about what I was doing. I cleaned the blood from the floor with bleach, then swept up the broken glass. By the time I finished, the kitchen looked normal again, as if nothing had happened, as if my wife's body wasn't lying wrapped in plastic on our kitchen floor. I would wait until the dead of night, I decided, when Jamie was in his deepest sleep. Then I would carry Sarah out to the densely wooded area that bordered our backyard. No one ever ventured deep into those woods. They were overgrown and supposedly protected conservation land. At 2 a.m., I hoisted Sarah's body onto my back. She felt heavier than she had in life, as if death had added substance to her frame. I staggered under the weight, moving slowly through the kitchen and out the back door, careful not to wake Jamie. The night was moonless, the darkness a blessing that concealed my terrible burden. The forest seemed to swallow me as I pushed through the underbrush. I walked for what felt like hours, though my phone told me only 30 minutes had passed. Finally, I reached a dense thicket where the ground dipped into a natural depression. With trembling hands, I laid Sarah's body in a hollow and covered it with fallen branches, dead leaves, and dirt. When I finished, there was no sign anything lay beneath the forest floor. On the walk back, I rehearsed what I would tell Jamie. Sarah had left us. She had decided she needed time away. She had gone to stay with her sister in Colorado. But when morning came and Jamie padded into the kitchen, bleary-eyed and asking for cereal, he didn't ask about his mother at all. Days passed. I called Sarah's workplace and, using her phone, sent texts to her friends saying she needed some time away. I was surprised at how easily the lies came, how readily people accepted them. Sarah had been unhappy for a long time. Her departure seemed almost expected. Still, Jamie's silence about his mother unnerved me. The boy would stare at me across the dinner table, his expression unreadable. Sometimes I would catch him watching me from doorways, his small face oddly expressionless. When I asked if he missed his mom, he would simply shrug and return to whatever he had been doing. By the 5th day, I began to feel a strange sensation, a persistent pressure between my shoulder blades. At first, I attributed it to stress or perhaps the strain of carrying Sarah's body that night. But the pressure grew, becoming a constant, nagging weight that made my back ache and my shoulders slump. That night, I dreamed of the forest. In the dream, I was wandering among the trees, lost, calling Sarah's name. I heard her voice, distant at first, then growing louder, until it seemed to be coming from directly behind me. I tried to turn around, but couldn't. Something was clinging to my back, arms wrapped around my neck, a cold breath on my ear. "I'm still here, Michael," Sarah's voice whispered. "I'll always be here." I woke with a gasp, my nightshirt soaked with sweat. The pressure on my back was excruciating now, as if someone were sitting on my shoulders. I stumbled to the bathroom and switched on the light, turning to examine my back in the mirror. Nothing was there, but the weight remained. As the days passed, I became increasingly aware of a presence in the house. Objects moved when I wasn't looking. The television would turn on by itself, always to the cooking shows Sarah had loved. At night, I would hear footsteps in the hallway, soft and measured, like Sarah's had been. But worst of all was the weight on my back. It grew heavier each day, forcing me to walk with a stoop. At work, my colleagues asked if I had injured myself. I mumbled excuses about pulled muscles and stress. Jamie continued to watch me with those knowing eyes. The boy had begun to withdraw, spending hours alone in his room with the door closed. On the rare occasions when he spoke, his voice was flat emotionless. When I tried to hug him, his body would go rigid, his eyes fixed on a point over my shoulder. Exactly 1 week after Sarah's death, I stood at the kitchen sink, washing dinner dishes. The weight on my back had become nearly unbearable, forcing me to brace myself against the counter. Jamie sat at the table behind me, silent as always, his gaze burning into my back. "Jamie," I said, not turning around, "would you like to watch a movie tonight?" No response. "Jamie? Son." I turned, wincing at the pain in my back. Jamie was staring at me, his face pale, his eyes wide and frightened. But there was something else in his expression, a strange, knowing look that made my blood run cold. "Son, you want to say something?" I asked, my voice breaking with strain. Jamie's lips parted. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible, a whisper that filled the kitchen more completely than any shout could have. "Daddy, why are you carrying Mommy on your back every day?" I felt the blood drain from my face. What did you say?" "Mommy," Jamie said, pointing to a spot just behind my right shoulder. "She's always on your back now. She looks sad, and her head is all red." I turned sharply, seeing nothing but empty air. But the weight, the terrible, crushing weight. I staggered to the bathroom, flipping on the light and staring into the mirror. For a second, just a second, I thought I saw Sarah's face over my shoulder, her skin gray, her eyes black hollows, her mouth twisted in a silent scream. I stumbled backward, crashing into the shower curtain and falling into the tub. The weight on my back seemed to shift, adjusting itself, arms tightening around my neck. "Sarah," I gasped. "Sarah, I'm sorry." From the doorway, Jamie watched, his expression now curious rather than frightened. "She can't hear you, Daddy," he said. "She's sleeping with her eyes open." That night, I lay in bed, the weight on my back pinning me to the mattress. I couldn't sleep, couldn't even close my eyes without seeing Sarah's face, twisted in accusation. The weight on my back had become so great that breathing was difficult. Each inhalation was a struggle, each exhalation a wheezing gasp. At 2 a.m., exactly 1 week after I carried Sarah's body into Forest, I heard my bedroom door creak open. Jamie stood in the doorway, a small silhouette against the hallway nightlight. "She wants to go back, Daddy," Jamie said, his voice oddly adult in its certainty. "What?" I managed to gasp. "Mommy, she wants to go back to the woods. She's showing me where she is." A cold dread settled in my stomach. How could Jamie know? "I don't know what you're talking about, Jamie," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Mommy's gone away for a while, remember?" Jamie shook his head slowly. "No, Daddy, Mommy's on your back, and she wants to go home." With those words, the weight on my back seemed to double, forcing me flat against the mattress. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Black spots danced at the edges of my vision. "Please," I gasped. "Please, Sarah." Jamie approached the bed, his small face solemn in the dim light. "I can see her, Daddy. I've always been able to see them." "Them?" I wheezed. "The dead people." Jamie said simply, "They're everywhere, but most of them don't stay. Mommy's staying because of you." The pressure on my back intensified, as if Sarah had heard the conversation and was expressing her agreement. I felt cold fingers against my neck, sliding slowly upward toward my face. "She's angry, Daddy," Jamie whispered. "She says you need to tell the truth." I felt tears streaming down my face. The weight was crushing me, Sarah's invisible presence grinding me into the mattress. Her fingers were at my throat now, cold and unyielding. I gasped, "I'll tell everything. Just please make her stop." Jamie stared at me for a long moment, then nodded once. "I'll ask her." The boy closed his eyes, his face taking on an expression of intense concentration. For a moment, nothing changed. Then, slowly, the pressure on my back began to ease. Not completely, but enough that I could draw a full breath. "She says you have to do it tomorrow," Jamie said, opening his eyes. "You have to tell the police everything. If you don't, she'll come back heavier." I nodded frantically. "I will, I promise. First thing tomorrow." Jamie studied me, then nodded, seemingly satisfied. He turned to leave the room, then paused in the doorway. "Daddy." "Yes, son?" "She's been talking to me every night. She says I'm special. She says I can see things other people can't." His voice dropped to a whisper. "She says there are others like me." With that, Jamie left, closing the door behind him. I lay in the darkness, the weight on my back now a constant, unmistakable presence. Sarah was still there, still watching, still waiting for me to fulfill my promise. I must have fallen asleep eventually, because I dreamed of Sarah again. But this time, she wasn't on my back. She was standing at the foot of our bed, our marriage bed, looking much as she had in life. No blood, no gray skin, no hollow eyes. Just Sarah, watching me with an expression of profound sadness. "I never meant to take him from you," she said. "I just wanted him to have a chance at happiness." I tried to speak, but no words came out. "He's special, Michael," she continued. "He sees things. He's always seen things. That's why he needs protection." I wanted to ask what she meant, but my dream self remained mute, paralyzed. "When this is over," Sarah said, "make sure he find the others. Promise me." I nodded, though I didn't understand. Sarah smiled, a sad, gentle smile that reminded me of our early days together, before the bitterness and resentment had taken root. "I loved you once," she said. "Remember that." Then she was gone and I was awake, and it was morning. The weight on my back was still there, but different now. Less angry, more expectant. My hand trembles as I write this. It's 6 a.m. now. Jamie is still asleep, and the house is quiet. I've called my mother to come stay with him. She doesn't know why yet, but she'll be here by 8. I told her it was an emergency at work. Another lie to add to the pile. I wonder if Jamie will tell her about Sarah on my back. Probably not. Children learn early to keep their secrets, especially the strange ones, the ones adults dismiss as imagination or attention-seeking. I've packed a small bag, toothbrush, change of clothes, the medications I take for high blood pressure and cholesterol. I won't need much where I'm going. The weight shifts between my shoulder blades, reminding me that I'm not alone. Sarah is with me. Sarah will always be with me. I should hate her for this, for the weight, for the haunting, for forcing my hand. But I don't. In some strange way, I'm grateful. Without her presence, I might have continued the deception indefinitely. I might have convinced myself that what I did was justified, that I was protecting Jamie. I might have buried my guilt along with Sarah's body and tried to move on with my life. But guilt, like truth, has a weight to it, a physical presence that cannot be denied. In a few hours, I'll drive to the police station. I'll confess everything. They'll arrest me, book me, eventually try me for murder. I'll plead guilty, of course. There's no point in fighting it. The evidence is overwhelming. The body in the woods, the clean kitchen, the elaborate lies. I'll go to prison for a long time, perhaps the rest of my life. And Jamie, my beautiful, strange, gifted son, what will happen to him? Sarah's parents will take him, I suppose. They've always doted on him. Even while keeping a cold distance from me, they'll raise him in their large house by the lake, send him to private schools, give him opportunities one never could. Perhaps that's the best. But who will understand his gift? Who will believe him when he sees things others can't? Who will protect him from the fear and isolation that comes with being different? Sarah mentioned others like him. I hope he finds them. I hope they can give him what I no longer can. The sun is rising now, casting long shadows across my desk. It's going to be a beautiful day. Clear skies, warm temperatures, the kind of spring morning that usually fills me with hope. Today, it just feels like an ending. I close my laptop and stand, wincing under the familiar weight between my shoulder blades. I walk to Jamie's room and open the door. He's still asleep, his face peaceful, one arm flung above his head in childish abandon. "I love you," I whisper, though I know he can't hear me. "I'm sorry." Behind me, I feel the weight shift as if Sarah's looking over my shoulder at our son. For a moment, we stand together, united in our love for this small, precious person. Then the moment passes, and I close the door gently. Time to face what I've done. The police station is quieter than I expected. I imagine chaos and drama. Phones ringing, officers rushing about, perps being dragged in handcuffs through the lobby. But it's almost serene. The desk sergeant looks bored, sipping coffee and scrolling through something on his computer. A few civilians wait in plastic chairs, thumbing through months-old magazines or staring at their phones. I need to report murder. I say, my voice barely audible. The sergeant looks up, interest flickering across his face. "Whose murder, sir?" I close my eyes briefly, feeling Sarah's weight shift on my back, her cold breath against my ear. "My wife's," I say. "I killed my wife." There's a moment of stillness, as if the entire station has drawn in a collective breath. Then everything happens at once. The sergeant is on his feet, calling for a detective. Another officer appears at my side, gently but firmly guiding me toward a hallway. Someone begins reading me my rights. I nod mechanically, acknowledging that I understand, that I waive my right to an attorney, that I want to make a full confession. They lead me to an interrogation room. Not the stark, intimidating space from television dramas, but a small, blandly furnished office with a table, a few chairs, and a video camera mounted in the corner. Two detectives join me, a man and a woman, both with the weary eyes of people who have seen too much of humanity's darkness. "My name is Detective Morales," the woman says, "and this is Detective Benson. We understand you want to make a statement about your wife's death." I nod. The weight on my back feels different here, more diffuse, spread across my shoulders like a heavy blanket rather than concentrated between my shoulder blades. Sarah is still with me, but her presence has changed. "Start from the beginning," Detective Morales says, pressing a button on a recording device. "What's your name, and what happened to your wife?" I take a deep breath. "My name is Michael Linden. 1 week ago, I killed my wife, Sarah Linden, during an argument in our kitchen." I tell them everything. The failing marriage, the affair, Sarah's plan to take Jamie to Colorado, the argument that turned physical, the terrible accident that ended her life. I tell them about the tarp, the midnight burial in the woods, the lies I've told since. I tell them I can lead them to the body. I don't tell them about the weight on my back. I don't tell them about Jamie's ability to see the dead. Some secrets aren't mine to share. When I finish, there's a long silence. Detective Benson scratches notes on a pad. Detective Morales studies me with eyes that seem to see right through me. "You understand," she says finally, "that what you're describing is still homicide. The circumstances may mitigate the charges, but you're looking at a significant prison sentence." I nod. I understand. "Why confess now?" Detective Benson asks. "You might have gotten away with it. The woods are deep, and your story about your wife leaving seemed to be working." I hesitate. How can I explain the weight on my back? The presence that's been haunting me? Jamie's solemn face as he told me his mother wanted justice? Guilt? I say simply. It's not the whole truth, but it's truth enough. Detective Morales nods as if she understands. Perhaps she does. Perhaps every confession she's ever taken has been prompted by the same invisible weight I carry. "We'll need you to sign this statement," she says, sliding a form across the table. "Then we'll talk about next steps." You'll be formally charged and processed. We'll arrange to have officers escort you to recover the body. I sign where indicated, my hand steady despite everything. As I finish, I glance up and see, for just a moment, Sarah standing in the corner of the room. Not the bloody, gray-skinned specter from my bathroom mirror, but Sarah she was in life. Proud, beautiful, fierce in her convictions. She nods once, acknowledging what I've done, then fades from view. The weight on my back eases slightly. Is my son here? I ask. Detective Morales nods. He's in the waiting area with an older woman who identified herself as your mother. Can I see him before everything else happens? The detectives exchange glances. Then Detective Morales nods again, briefly, under supervision. They lead me back to the lobby. Jamie sits beside my mother on one of the plastic chairs, swinging his legs idly. He looks up as I approach, his eyes finding mine immediately. Then his gaze shifts to the space just behind my right shoulder, and he smiles. A small, secret smile that breaks my heart and mends it simultaneously. I kneel before him, ignoring the officers hovering nearby. Jamie, I say, my voice rough with emotion, I have to go away for a while. He nods solemnly. I know, Daddy. You're going to stay with Grandma for now, and later, probably with Grandpa and Grandma Linden. Another nod. He seems so calm, so accepting, that I wonder if Sarah's been preparing him for this. If their midnight conversations have included plans for his future. I'm sorry, I whisper, not sure if I'm apologizing for what I did to his mother, for what I'm about to do to him, or for the strange gift he carries that sets him apart from other children. Jamie reaches out, touching my cheek with small, cool fingers. It's okay, Daddy. Mommy says she forgives you. I feel tears well in my eyes, but I blink them back. Does she? Jamie glances over my shoulder, then back at me. She says goodbye, Daddy. She's going to rest now. As he speaks, I feel the weight on my back lighten dramatically, not disappearing entirely, but shifting, changing, becoming something I can bear. Sarah's presence is still there, but different now, less accusing, more vigilant, as if she's staying not to punish me, but to watch over our son. I hug Jamie tightly, inhaling the scent of his hair, Johnson's baby shampoo, the same brand we've used since he was an infant. I love you, I murmur. Remember that. No matter what happens, no matter what people say about me, I love you. I love you too, Daddy, he says, his voice muffled against my shoulder. Then he pulls back, his expression serious beyond his years. Mommy says to tell you that when I'm older, I'll find the others. She says not to worry. Before I can ask what he means, Detective Benson lays a hand on my shoulder. We need to go now, Mr. Linden. I stand, my legs unsteady. My mother watches with tears streaming down her face. I haven't explained anything to her yet, but I think she understands the gravity of the situation. Take care of him, Mom. I say. She nods, pulling Jamie close to her side. I will. As they lead me away, I glance back one last time. Jamie is watching me, his small face solemn but unafraid. He raises his hand in a small wave, then points to his right shoulder, a silent acknowledgement of the burden I carry. The weight on my back shifts again, settling into a more comfortable position. Sarah's weight, my guilt, my penance, a burden I will carry for the rest of my life. The cell is smaller than I expected, but not uncomfortable. A narrow bed, a metal toilet and sink combination, a small desk bolted to the wall. Through the high, barred window, I can see a patch of sky, currently painted with the orange and pink hues of sunset. I've been here 3 months now. The trial was quick. I pled guilty to second-degree murder, accepting the prosecutor's deal rather than risking a first-degree conviction at trial. 20 years, with the possibility of parole after 12. A fair sentence, all things considered. Jamie visits twice a month, accompanied by Sarah's parents. They're cold toward me, understandably, but they bring my son. That's more kindness than I deserve. They tell me he's adjusting well. He's doing fine in school and making friends. He doesn't talk about seeing his mother anymore or any other dead people. Perhaps that's the best. The world is kinder to those who keep their strangeness hidden. But sometimes when we're alone in the visitation room, he'll look at a point just over my shoulder and smile his secret smile. And I know that Sarah's still with me, still watching, still ensuring that I fulfill my obligation to our son. The weight on my back has become familiar now, almost comforting in its constancy. It rises with me in the morning, accompanies me through the monotonous prison days, settles with me at night. Sarah's presence has become my companion, my conscience, my penance, and, in some strange way, my salvation. I still dream of her sometimes. In the dreams, we're younger, happier, the bitterness not yet rooted in our hearts. She shows me fragments of Jamie's future, a teenager with solemn eyes standing in a circle with other young people, their faces turned skyward, a young man kneeling by a hospital bed, holding the hand of an elderly patient whose face lights up at his touch, a grown man with Jamie's eyes and Sarah's smile, teaching a classroom full of attentive children. I don't know if these dreams are messages from Sarah or simply my own hopes for our son's future, but they give me peace. They give me something to hold on to during the long years ahead. The weight shift between my shoulder blades, a gentle reminder of Sarah's presence. I reach up, touching the spot where I sometimes imagine her hands rest. "I'm sorry," I whisper to the empty cell. "I'm so sorry." There's no answer, of course. There never is. But the weight adjusts, settling more comfortably across my shoulders, and I know she hears me. I know she understands. And that will have to be enough. As the sun sets outside my cell window, casting long shadows across the concrete floor, I finish writing this account. Perhaps someday Jamie will read it and understand. Perhaps someday he'll forgive me, as his mother has. Until then, I'll carry this weight. The weight of guilt, the weight of loss, the weight of Sarah's watchful presence. I'll carry it willingly, gratefully even, as my penance and my reminder. Some burdens, once taken up, can never be put down. But with time, perhaps they become easier to bear. Not lighter, never lighter, but more familiar, more a part of who we are. And who I am now is defined by this weight on my back, by Sarah's presence, by Jamie's future, by the terrible mistake that ended one life and forever altered two others. The weight shifts again, settling in for the night. I close my eyes and whisper into the darkness, "Good night, Sarah." And somewhere, just beyond the reach of hearing, I imagine she whispers back,